Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Students of the Word. Today, we return to this is session number 56, I should say. And today we return to Cain. Last time, we did some thinking about why Cain, like why, if you're going to illustrate not loving your brother, Cain seems a little extreme. And we were looking at the way that sin was discussed in that rather remarkable passage back in Genesis. We were already seeing how in an earlier paragraph, John seemed to be thinking about the specific wording in Genesis chapter 3 with the whole the way that he kind of parallels the temptation in the garden situation with the lust of the eyes, the yeah the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. Anyway, so here looking at Cain, or sort of sin lying in wait for Cain, and that was prompting us to some, I thought, fruitful reflections on this question of the causal relationship, right, between Cain and sin, and in particular, Cain as an illustration of the children of the accuser, right, as we were talking about last time. But of course, today, the thing we were not talking about last time is what John gives as the explanation. Because of course, and many of you were wanting to talk about that. And I was kind of holding off on that because I wanted to focus on the other element last time. But this week, I want to go into that. Last week, we're talking about why Cain. This one, it's why Cain. It's the explanation that John gives as to why Cain does what he does. And so just to go ahead and read that for a second, and then we'll jump back for a little bit because I want to do some contextualizing. For this is the message which you have heard from the beginning, that we are to love one another, not as Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And for what reason did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. And then I want to complete that, to connect that immediately to do not be surprised, brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. That seems to me the clear transition there. And so, one thing that I think, again, just in a sense, following up on the reason why I didn't want to kind of leap into this last week, is I do think that there are two separate things here that John is kind of interweaving, and that I wanted to kind of meditate on and separate out a little bit. One is, what does it mean for Cain to be of the evil one and, slaughtered or butchered his brother? We talked about that word last time. Going on and asking for what reason did he murder him? And thinking about the world hating us, right? Not being surprised if the world hates us. It's connected. It's clearly related to being of the evil one, but it's not exactly the same thing. And it brings in this other question. Being of the evil one is appealing to the language that he'd just been using, that he just set up in the previous paragraph, right? The one who practices sin is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. No one who is born of God practices sin, right? This question of the children of God and the children of the accuser, right? By this, the children of God and the children of the accuser are obvious. Anyone who does not do righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not love his brother. So there's that stuff, right? But then there's this question about the world is a separate thing. And of course, we've talked about this before. This is another one of those things. I know that I grew up, hearing the phrase "the world" sort of thrown out in a Christian context, in a way that makes me feel like I know exactly what John must be talking about, and that makes me nervous about it, right? In this, as in so many other things like Antichrist or even Christ, and we've talked about this several times. It's important, I think, for us to look at what John is establishing here and not just kind of import what our own, kind of Christian culture has taught us this means, right? So let's look carefully. Let's do a quick refresher course on the world thing, right? To make sure that we can see what from the things he's already established in his epistle, John is bringing in. So as we saw, it was back in paragraph 6 that we got this. Um, Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. So this is the first time he takes the word cosmos and starts using it this way. Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes, did the order wrong. That's why I was tripping over it, because I started with the eyes and I'm like, oh no, that's not quite right. Yes, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. The world is passing away and also its desire, its lust, but the one who does the will of God abides forever, abides to the age. So this was the paragraph in which he established this concept of the cosmos, right? This rather peculiar way of using cosmos, which is quite different from how he was using the word cosmos before. So just a couple things that I would note looking back over paragraph 6 here. One is, note what he begins with: do not love the world nor the things in the world. That is, it's about stuff. It's about things. He doesn't start it off about people. And notice what he certainly does not start off with. He has every opportunity, if he wanted to start talking about the diabolos, right? Start talking about the accuser, start talking about the evil one. In fact, if you remember, this comes right after the poem, right? He has just said, I have written to you, young men, because you are strong and the word of God abides in you and you have overcome the evil one. It would have been super easy to be like, and speaking of the evil one, right? Do not love the world nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Like he could have made that connection explicit right away, to be like the world, the world is, to identify or explicitly connect the world with the evil one. He didn't do it, right? That wasn't, in fact, where he went with that here. Again, I'm not suggesting by that John is not in some sense aligning them. I'm just saying he doesn't take that opportunity. He had it, right? It was right there. He had just talked about the evil one. So for some reason, he chose to talk about the world kind of on its own, in a sense, right? Not merely as like the empire of the evil one or some kind of extension of the will of the evil one that is to be overcome, right? He talks about the world and its things and its desires, right? The things and the desires clearly are connected, right? The desires for the things and the desires for the things in the world, the lusts for the things in the world, is contrasted with the love of the Father, right? So, in other words, one of the effects that it seems to me his not talking about the evil one here does is it keeps the focus rather on us, right? This is not like the world, which is like the plaything of the evil one or the zone of the evil one. He instead talks about our relationship with the world. If we love the world versus loving the Father, it's about the direction in which our own allegiance goes, our own orientation is. And the thing that the world offers us seems primarily to be things, right? The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. Again, contrasted with the love of the love of the Father, which he already has connected way back in paragraph 3, you may remember. This is paragraph 3, with abiding, right? Um, Whoever keeps his word, in him the love of God has truly been perfected. The love of God has been perfected. This is the first time he's talking about the love of God. In this way, right? The love of God has been perfected. By this we know that we are in him. The one who says that he abides in him ought himself also walk just as he walked, right? The perfection of God's love and abiding in him. This is the first time abiding comes up in this epistle, right? This is the introduction of the abiding in God concept, right? Connected with the perfection of the love of God from the beginning. So when we come back to this love of the world versus love of the Father, it's contrasted in the way that we had, like the truth and lies before, right? Walking in the light versus walking in the darkness and thinking you're walking in the light, right? Loving your brother versus hating your brother, um, as we got back in paragraph 4. Um, yeah, 4, 5 was the poem. So again, it's this context in which he brings up the world. So the world is initially raised here by John, not as a like a force on its own, but as like a rival, essentially, for God, a thing. Well, having things, right? The world is like a collection of things which will tend to draw um, our own desires, right? Instead of God. So again, it's about us. Is our um, uh, which way is our desire pointed towards God or towards the things of the world? Um, and Randall, yes, I was remembering. I'm glad I started this habit of putting my asterisks on the English translation to remind myself of the places where I think it's interestingly different from the Greek, right? Randall's pointing out that lust or desire in the singular, which it also is, of course, there in verse 17, despite the translation, may imply a focus on desire as a concept more than desires as individual things. Yeah, no, I agree. But again, I think the overall construction here, because desire in itself, um, again, I don't think that it's, well, I guess you could say that desire in this sense, like this sort of desire, is not good, right? But again, it just, you look at the way that verse 15 is constructed, right? Don't love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father isn't in him. And then he starts talking about the lust of flesh and the lust of the eyes, these things being the things that are in the world, and that those things are not from the Father. Now, it's true here that we uh it's true here that, yeah, right. Aiden says, how Buddhist do we want to get here? Yeah, no, I don't mean in that sense. And that's one of the reasons why I'm resistant to saying like desire itself is bad. But anyway, sorry, I was just noticing another thing there. That John turns it around. Notice how he turns it around in verse 16? But boy, I mean, like, no matter how much time we spend on this stuff earlier before, you still just see new things every time you go back to it. It's just kind of how this works. But anyway, notice how he turns it around, right? Verse 15, do not love the world nor the things in the world. It's about like where our love, where our desire is pointed, right? And even the love of the Father is not in him. Almost sounds like that could mean our love for the Father, right? Like if we're busy loving this stuff over here, we're not loving the Father. Those two things are in contradiction to each other. But in verse 16, it's clearly turned around, right? Um, all these things, all these desires that are in the world are not from the Father, but from the world, right? Okay, all right, fine. I give it. I was gonna try. I'm like, I'm not gonna go back to the Greek and dig into this, but I totally am. Okay, hang on. I want to make sure because prepositions, right? Like I don't always trust the English translation on the prepositions. Okay, because all that is in the world, yep. Okay, right, and our the desire of the sarkos and the desire of the ophthalmon, right? Okay, is ek tu patros. There it is. Out of ek. That's the same ek that we get in the from God and from the evil one in up in paragraph 9, right? Um, yeah, okay, all right. Um, but from the world. Yeah. Okay. So that is even more yeah. Yeah, that's even clearer. Let me just make sure I'm remembering that correctly. Here we are. Yep, yeah. Ectutheo is of God. Um, yes. The just as yes. The one doing sin is ectu diabolo. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's our same preposition. Yep. Okay. It's from the Father, out of the Father as from a source or a parent. Yes, yes. So these desires of the world do not have their source in the Father, they have their source in the world, right? We so he does kind of swing around. First, he introduces the idea of the world as being the opposite object of love. Don't love the world. Love the Father instead, right? For the desires that are in the world are not out of the Father, but they're out of the world. So the world is not only a rival to us, right? Or like in our eyes, potentially, right, a rival to the Father. But they are all, but it's also a separate source of these things, right? Some things come from the world, some things come from the Father. And of course, the world is passing away, just like the darkness is ending, and its lusts, the things that are out of it, are also passing away. Whereas the one who does the will of God will live to the age. Okay. Anyway, so we have here uh, yeah, Aiden, that's exactly what I was noticing. Aiden says it's super interesting how this seems to say that any desire for a thing comes from that thing more than it comes from the one desiring. Yeah, now of course, like it hardly seems like a thing that John's going to do to kind of let us off the hook, to like sort of imply that we like it's not our fault, right? Like we like we're passive in all of this. Um, certainly, our wrestling with paragraph 9 did not suggest that, right? Um, but yeah, yeah. But I agree with you that that's why that what I'm calling a turn, in verse 16 there is so interesting to me in the middle of this paragraph there. Um, yes. Okay. So the world, both the Father and the world, are both the target of our desire, um, and the source of that sort of desire. Again, just as when we abide in the Father, the love of, like, if we keep His word, as he said back in paragraph 3, if we keep His word, the love of God is perfected in us, right? It's not like if we keep His word, then we love God with a good kind of love, right? Again, in the end, it isn't exactly about our love for God. It's still kind of a story about God's love, right? Um, which is which is interesting. And Stephen, I absolutely agree. I'm not at all. Yeah, Stephen is pointing out how do not love the world certainly seem to suggest that there is a conscious effort on our part. Um, yes, yes. Um, Yeah, I don't know. Steven's wondering about the difference between um lust and love here, the way that love is discussed and the way that desire is discussed, whether there's a sort of a correlation between in an involuntary response and a voluntary response. I'm not sure. I certainly don't think that lust is involuntary in this way. I mean, goodness, the scene that it's paralleling, flesh, the eyes, and the boastful pride of life, that is Genesis 3, um, uh, is all about the choice that's being made there, right? And it's all about the rationalization for the choice. Um, Yeah, yeah, yeah. Aiden, I agree. The Greek word for love here is not really about wanting or desiring so much as about esteeming and caring about. Yes. This is agape, isn't it? Do you know of the world? This is we're agapeing things here. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. Which, remember, as we established a long time ago, is the super generic, right? It's the word in Greek you would use to translate, the I heart things bumper sticker, right? Um, So yes, I this is a thing that I like and approve of, right? Um, this is the thing uh, that I esteem. That I esteem. I like that way of thinking about it, Aiden. Anyway, okay. So the thing that I wanted to then, so on the one hand, this is one of the contexts that we get for Cain up in paragraph 10. But there's one other I wanted to go back to, um, and that's paragraph 2. Even back to the beginning, notice that there has been I want to go back to not where he says more about our desires and our motivations and reasons for choosing things, but where he doesn't say that, if that makes sense. Let me show you what I mean. Um, this is the message we have heard from him and announced to you that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. If we say that we have fellowship with him and yet walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he himself is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his son, cleanses us from all sin. So notice how, this is this paragraph, this second paragraph establishes a lot of the paradigms of what we've been looking at throughout the epistle. But notice how the motivation question, he totally doesn't, he kind of leaves it hanging here, right? If we say that we have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness. So there's the lie that he is exposing here. And this, of course, begins the pattern of this exposure of lying, right? If we say we have fellowship with him and yet walk in darkness, if we say that we have no sin, if we say that we have not sinned, if we say, I have come to know him and we don't keep the commandments, if we say we are in the light and yet hate our brother, right? All of those, that's again, this pattern that he's exposing through paragraphs 2 through 4, right? But why? What what makes us do that? Why is it that we say that we have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness? What is our motivation for not practicing the truth? Um, this is a specific act, right? That he's accusing us of. That is to say, he's not just saying we've made a mistake, right? I mean, he could have said something like, if we say we have fellowship with him and yet walk in, if we think we have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, we are mistaken, right? He could, but that's not the way he describes this, right? He calls it a lie. This is the opposite of truth, right? This is us telling a lie. We are the liars. And that, of course, is something, the lying thing is something he goes on to connect with Antichrist up in paragraph 7, right? Who is the liar but the one, remember? So this is a significant big deal, but he doesn't talk about it here because he hasn't kind of brought that layer in yet. But when we go from this point of view, from our point of view, having gone through paragraph 6, with the desire for the world, the love of the world versus the love of the Father, and then of course having gotten to Cain in paragraph 10, now when we look back at paragraph 2, we sort of notice this has been lurking there all along, right? This question of why do we do this? What motivates us to say we have fellowship with him and yet walk in darkness? What motivates us to say we've come to know him and not keep his commandments? What motivates us to say we're in the light and yet hate our brother? And this is starting to get closer and closer to the immediately relevant bit, right? For this is the message which you have heard from the beginning, that we are to love one another, not as Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And for what reason did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil, and but his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. Now, this is following up. I skipped one. Might as well not skip it. back in paragraph 8, right? We get the one reminder. We established the world stuff in paragraph 6, where we kind of began here today, right? Then he does the Antichrist stuff in paragraph 7. Then, of course, in paragraph 8, we've got this big visionary future oriented paragraph, right? About this is the paragraph brought to you by the word revelation, right? So that when he is revealed, we will have confidence, right? Um, and when he is revealed, we will be like him. It is not yet revealed what we shall be. Remember this paragraph. You may remember there was that one sort of almost feels like a non sequitur thrown in the middle of this glorious but kind of hard to understand, hard to envision paragraph, right? If you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone also who practices righteousness is born of him. See what kind of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called the children of God, and such we are. For this reason, the world does not know us, because it did not know him. Beloved, now we are children of God, and it's not yet been revealed what we will be. Right? That's the sentence where it's like, for this reason, the world doesn't know us. Which feels like a side note or like a footnote almost in the middle of this paragraph, right? But what is he talking about? He already talked about the world as both this alternative choice, right? This alternative target of our esteem and affection, and also as an alternative source of desires and things as well, right? Now he talks about it. For this reason, the world does not know us, because it did not know him. And let me just remind myself quick, which no is this? This is because the world is not gnoske. It has not come to know us, because it did not come to know him. So this is not what's the other one? Oi, oi, okay, I'm forgetting it. Oi, oida, there it is, right? We know. Oidamen, there it is right there. We know that when he appears. Right. So yes, good. So he uses the word the gnosko word. This is exactly like back in paragraph 3 was the first time he introduced this word. By this we know that we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments. The one who says, I have come to know him, I have gnosko him, right? I have come to know, I've become progressively intimately acquainted with God, right? Whereas the oida, the classic oida moment in John so far was in paragraph 7, right? When he starts saying things like, I have not written to you because you do not know the truth, but because you do know it. And where's the yes, but you have an anointing from the Holy One, and you all know, right? That's the oidate stuff, right? What has been revealed to you, as opposed to getting to know, becoming acquainted with. So that's the world is not acquainted with us. The world has not come to know us. For this reason, the world does not know us, because it did not know him. So the connection between us and him, we are born of him. Everyone who does righteousness is born of him. I mean, it's an amazing kind of love that the Father has bestowed on us, Father being the source of the love again. Of course, we will notice that we should be called the children of the Tekna Theou, the big payoff moment for the Tekna language earlier on in the epistle. For this reason, because we are called the children of God, and such we are, because we are the children of God. Obviously, the world's not going to know us, because it doesn't know him. And how could it know us, since we are born of him, since we are out of him, from him, right? As parent to child, he is our source. just as he was the source of the love, right? That like the those things are of the world, but not of the Father. That's that same of language that he's going to go on in the next paragraph, in paragraph 9, where we spent so long talking about being of the devil, of the accuser, right? As opposed to being born of God, the children of God and the children of the devil. Uh, yeah, yeah. So we are, so those things, the desires of the world, are out of the world and not out of God. We, everyone who practices, who does righteousness, is of God, which again he expands on here as we discussed in paragraph 9, right? So okay, now we bring all these things here back to our verse in paragraph 10. Not as Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And for what reason did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil, but his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. So we come back around to do not love the world, because you can't love the world and the Father. And the things of the world are out of the world and not out of the Father, right? And then to this is why, because we're out of God, that's why the world doesn't know us. So don't love the world. Don't give in to the desires of the world. Don't submit to the desires of the world. Love the Father instead. Then the world will not know you. And now the world hates you. Right? Let's look at this. Where are we? Oh, we're way up at the top. Okay. Let's go back down. We're scrolling. Okay, here we go. Um, right? We got, yeah, the Cain is faxing his Adelphon. Yep. Okay. And Harin, oh, that's right. Harin. And by the gift of what did he slay him? All right, that revelation. I'd forgotten about that. Oh my goodness. Yes, yes. Um, uh, right. By the grace of what? So the because here is that grace word, that gift word, Harin. What was the what was the kind of translation we were toying with last time to sort of try to do justice to the meaning of that word charin, which is unusual. It's just not just a. I mean, it does have that causal sense. It's not incorrect to say because, but but it's a more special word than that, right? Um, by grace of, by gift of. Thanks to, yeah, thanks to. I think that was the one I was trying to remember, Randall. Um, and thanks to what did he slay him? Thanks to what? And you see why this is important, especially coming back as we're doing now from the other things, especially from chapter 2, verse 16, from that turnaround. The things of the world are from the world instead of are ek to cosmo instead of ek the patros, right? Um, Thanks to what did he butcher him, his brother? Thanks to what? The butchering of his brother, the desires which led him uh, to butcher his brother came out of the world, right? It's once again that even that word harin um, seems to give, in a sense, if you see what I mean, the world credit, right, for this desire. Because of what? And thanks to what did he butcher him? Hoti, right now we get our regular because. Hoti, ta'erga, the works of him, our ponera, right? Our same evil word we've been using, the evil one and everything else, right? So linking it directly back to the evil one, which that poneru, right? Just in the previous verse. Um, because the works of him were ponera. Um, ta de, those, however, de. Have we seen that? Have we talked about day? Have I learned about this conjunction? Day is everywhere. Really? Everywhere? Interesting. Um, a very generic conjunction that means then or but or sometimes and. Okay. Oh, day is everywhere. It doesn't mean everywhere. It is everywhere. I see. I see. It's all over the place. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very general connector. Okay. Very general connector meaning and or but. Sorry, I thought you for a second you were saying it means everywhere. I was like, whoa, okay, I don't know about that. Okay, okay, okay. And or but. Because the works of him were evil, uh, and but those of the brother of him were right. So okay, so generic connector. So I'm not even gonna apply and or but. I'm just gonna be like the works of him were evil, parallel. So tell you what, in my own head, and you can tell me if this is okay. In my own head, I'm going to translate the word day with a semicolon, right? As the works of him were evil, semicolon, those of his brother were righteous. Like it's a thing that just is like its job is just to balance and connect these two clauses, right? His works are evil, his brother's works are righteous. Um, Yeah, yeah. Okay, so Randall, the origin of it is but the meaning has become bleached to be a general connector. Okay, okay. I get that. So semicolon leaning towards but then in that case. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Um, however, those so we've got so by using the pronoun here, um, ta, that's just a pointer, right? Um, Oh no, it's just an article to do the parallel. Ta erga and then ta. So it's just a it's a precisely parallel elliptical phrase, right? Gotcha. Gotcha. The works. Oh yeah, that's sexy. You can do that with the prep with the article because it declines, right? Neutral, you see that it's nominative neutral plural, and so you know to supply the nominative neutral plural um uh noun there, right? Yeah. No, cool. All right. Gotcha. Gotcha. Um yeah. Right. Right. Fun. Fun. This is the fun that of course we don't get to have in English because we don't decline our nouns. So, what can we do? Okay, got it. So but again what that whenever you've got an elliptical phrase like that where he's not even repeating the noun, it's to me it makes the parallel even stronger because it's like you've got to go back to the previous to the other half of the equation, right, in order even to complete the sentence, right? Okay, okay. um so because the works of him were evil and those of his brother righteous, the verb too, we're using the same verb too, so I mean these are like totally intertwined things. um yeah, yeah. um yes. uh the brother of him righteous. Those of the brother of him righteous. Okay, great. Yeah, we can't even be that elliptical in English, right? We 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 can do it with the noun, right? That's what the English does here, because his own deeds were evil, but his brothers were righteous. I guess you could say, but his brothers righteous, right? It is possible to pull off in English, but it's easier with the declined article there. That's fun. Okay, so important things. John is using three this sentence uses three really conspicuous words, conspicuous in the context of First John so far, right? Ponera, as we already discussed, dikaya, righteous. That's the same word as all the doing righteousness we've been talking about quite a lot in the last few paragraphs. And then adelpha, brother, which is obviously literally relevant to Cain, right? Um, but also relevant to loving your brother, right? The Adelpho lurks behind even the Allelus in a sense that we get, the love one another. He just used loving the brother of him, the one not loving the brother of him at the end of paragraph 9 there. So this proximity, and of course the fraternal relationship, right? The sibling relationship between believers has been was has been implied from the beginning, right? Loving your brother. Well, I shouldn't say, I guess, from the beginning, from when that gets introduced back in paragraph 4. Loving your brother, saying you love your brother, or saying you walk in light and, you're in the light and yet you hate your brother, right? That's the first time we started talking about brothers in that way, here in the epistle. But the sibling thing becomes more clear, and more significant when he starts talking about us as the children of God, right? We are brothers, we are siblings, in a more intimate, I was going to say a more literal sense, but it's still metaphorical, but still a more significant metaphorical sense, right? A more direct sense. If we are all ek to theou, right? If we're all out of God, if we're all the children, the techna of God. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, so this is, I think, another reason why he comes back to Cain. Um, Again, not just as a sort of an easy example of what not to do, right? Um, but as because of the relevance, because of the force that this sibling metaphor has acquired now that he's talking about the children of God. Um, but it's interesting. Notice an interesting thing here. There's a kind of irony to how he's using Cain here. Cain's issue, right, was butchering his brother. Like he had an actual literal brother that he actually literally butchered. Um, but he's just said, John, not Cain, John has just said that Cain was out of the evil one, was out of the ponero, right? Ek tu ponero. Yep, there it is, right there. Cain was ek tu ponero. He was out of the evil one. If Cain was out of the evil one, and Abel, as one who does righteousness, dikaya, was therefore presumably out of God, a child of God, not a child of the accuser, not a child of the evil one, but a child of God. Then they weren't brothers, actually, right? They had different parents. That's the irony that Cain, as an example, kind of raises here, right? And of course, it comes back to that footnote sentence in the middle of paragraph 8, doesn't it? Right? Not only not only are those who are out of the, ektupaneru, out of the evil one, um, sort of hostile to uh those who are righteousness, those who are righteous, those who do righteousness, those who are out of God, um, but they don't even know them, right? Not only are they not necessarily, not only are they not from the same parents, not only do they not have the same origin, they're not even acquainted, right? Um, and isn't that interesting? Because the works of him were evil. Naturally, he's ectu ponero. Of course, his erga were ponera. What else would they be? right? And those of the brother of him righteous. Now you'll remember the choice of Cain and sin's desire to pounce on him that we talked about last time. Um, I don't think that John is thinking at any point, as we've been talking about, he keeps talking about our choice. He keeps talking about doing righteousness and doing sin. Um, I don't think there's a question of like simple or simplistic predestination here, right? Cain didn't have any choice. He was just of the evil one, and so does evil. What else could he do? He could have done something else. Again, as we said last time, that's one of the conspicuous things about the Cain choice. Um, but then going immediately to do not be surprised, thalmazete. Huh, that's an interesting word. Um, do not be surprised. Let's look this up. Thalmazo. Where do we see this? Oh, when like Jesus marvels at the faith of the this is the centurion, right? People were amazed, crowds are amazed, crowd marvels, his disciples are amazed. Matthew has got people being what thalmazo all over the place. Amazed, astonished, right? Pilate's amazed. Jesus is amazed at their unbelief. Okay. Right. So lots of people have this reaction to Jesus. Yes. How about John? Oh boy, people, oh my goodness, Luke is even more onto this than Matthew was. Yikes. I want to see John though. Let's keep going. Luke, John, where do we get in John? Okay. Marvel not that I said you should be you must be born again. Okay, so he says to Nicodemus. Um his disciples are thalmazo that he's talking to the Samaritan woman by the well. Um, okay. How the dude at the pool of Siloam is gonna see things greater than this that he'll marvel at. Don't be surprised by this, and there's marveling. Okay. All right. He doesn't use it as often. John doesn't use it as often as Matthew and Luke do. But right. I've done this one deed and you all marvel. Yes, you're all surprised. Um, okay, interesting. Don't marvel. Don't be amazed. So this is not surprise. This is not like a jump scare, right? This is like to be astonished and taken aback by what you're seeing, right? This is, I have seen something which is like outside my worldview, and I can't even, I don't even get it, right? This is a thing. I am confronted with a thing so far beyond my standard expectations that, you know, I'm stunned and astonished by it. So reaction to Jesus' miracles, but it's notice that there was this other thread in all of those usages in the Gospels, not just like, holy cow, that was incredible, right? I mean, there's that thread. Most of them, I think, are that, or at least very, very many. But uh, a lot of it, um, but a lot of it is also, I expect you to do or say a particular thing and you're not, right? Whether it's Pilate being like, marveling at Jesus, saying like, I'm actually really surprised at how you're acting right now. Right. Or whether it's Jesus saying like, I can't believe y'all are struggling with this. Right. I am marveling at your unbelief. Um, so yeah, yeah. Um, all of those, both of those senses, both the like, I am shocked and stunned at what I am seeing. I can't believe this. This is amazing. Um, or dude, did you really just say that? Right? Are you kidding me right now? Right? That so both of those seem to be the way that Um, the gospel writers, anyway, are using a thaumazo. Okay, don't be surprised, brothers, Adelphoi. Notice he goes, I mean, come on, come on. He goes out of his way to address his audience as Adelphoi, right in the context of talking about Cain and Abel and talking about loving your brother, right? I mean, he couldn't make it clearer that this brother business, right, this sibling stuff is directly relevant to us now in our interactions together, right? Devora, yeah, exactly, especially since it's a shift from techna, from children, right? He's been addressing them as children before. And I don't um I think I think it's all about, well, all about, could be about more than one thing, but um it seems to me that so one could read it, right, as some sort of progression, theoretically. Oh, like notice he addresses them as children at the beginning of the letter, but now in the middle of the letter he shifted to referring to them as brothers. Does that imply that, like, when they've sort of come to this point, now they're no longer his children, but they're now, they're no longer kind of beneath him, but now he's addressing them as equals? Like, I could see somebody making an argument like that. Um, but I wouldn't say that at all. I think that it's way too manifestly relevant to his immediate context, right? And I think that's the whole point of the techne also. Um the technia, I should say techne is something quite different. Right, techne is like skill or ability to do something. Anyway, never mind. Never mind, doesn't matter. Point is Technia versus Adelphoi here. Um, he was calling them Technia, he was calling them children, I think, entirely because he was setting them up for paragraph 8, right? That when he revealed that they were children, just not his children in affection. Yes, he has a kind of parental affection for them. That's not, and I'm not unsaying that. That's not, I'm trying not trying to deflect. That's not that that's untrue. But I think that he was clearly setting up Technia, the children of God there. But here, Adelphoi, so obviously relevant to all of the sibling stuff with Cain and Abel specifically, and with the parallel between, at the end of the last paragraph, paragraph 9, um, between doing righteousness and loving your brother. Anyone not doing righteousness is not of God, and also the one not agapon, loving the brother of him. Um, so yeah. I think that's an egregious invitation to application, right, of them to each other. Um, a yeah, like, this is not just an academic comment about Cain and Abel, right? This is connected with us brothers. Especially, remember, he was like in the Antichrist paragraph, he's talking about those who were with them, but then were not of them, right? Those who went out from among them, right? Those who broke the siblinghood, right, that they had. So clearly, this all is very relevant. And speaking of Cain, yeah. Anyway, okay. So don't marvel, brothers, if mise hates, right? Simple hatred. Now that's that word. Um, have we come across that word? Have we done that word? Yes. Where have we? Let's let's check this out here. We're gonna have a bunch of these. 41. Well, let's go down. Let's go all the way down. First John. Oh yeah, we've had this a bunch of times. Where did we get it? Um, right. Hating your brother is where we first got it. So this is paragraph 4. Anyone who says he's in the light and yet hates his brother. Um, and then similarly, the one who hates his brother is in the darkness, right? And walketh in darkness And then we got and then here, the world hates you. Okay, so this is the next one. We're gonna get it a few more times. No spoilers. Okay. Okay. Good. Good. Yeah, we're gonna get it still in this paragraph, so that's hardly a spoiler. Okay, so we only got it in the context of paragraph 4 before about hating your brother. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. That was good to establish. Okay, if the world hates you, plural. Don't be surprised, brothers, if the world hates you. Okay. Um, and oh, Aiden, I'm not we're not done talking about the causal effect of the perception of righteousness. Um, uh, Hayden was afraid we're being a little hasty in going past the because his brothers were righteous. Thanks to the fact that his own deeds were, or no, and thanks to what did he murder him? Because Hoti, his own deeds were evil, but his brothers were righteous. No, I'm not moving on to leave that behind. I'm moving on because I think that it is really important to understand. It would be possible, I think, um, in theory. It's a little bit less compelling. Um, sorry, let me just actually finish the sentence. Verse 13 could be taken as a kind of a footnote sentence again, right? We're talking about, loving your brother versus hating your brother. And then in verse 14, we know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brothers and sisters. The one who does not love remains in death, right? So we're going to be talking about love and hate, and we're going to be talking about, brothers and the sisters. It's going to be about, he's going to be focused on the love of siblings all the way to um through the end of this paragraph, right? So this side note that says, "Hey, don't be amazed, right? Don't reel back in shock if the world hates you." Can can sound almost. Do you see what I mean about the footnote thing? Just like in paragraph 8, the whole like the world doesn't. This is why the world doesn't know us because it doesn't know God, right? Seems like a side note related. It's not like it's irrelevant. It's not like it's out of absolutely nowhere, but it doesn't seem to be kind of part of the main theme of this paragraph. There would be a way of reading this paragraph where verse 13 kind of sounds that way too, right? Kind of sounds similarly um, uh, a side note or a footnote on this paragraph. Um, I definitely don't think it is. I do think it is in paragraph 8. Like I think the reason he sort of notes that in the middle of paragraph 8. I do think it's something like a footnote, right? It's almost like John is saying, put a pin in this. We're going to come back to this, right? But I just want you to notice, even in the midst of like, at the risk of digressing for a sentence from like these huge revelations of the future that I'm talking about here in paragraph 8, I just want you to notice in passing that the world does not know us, does not gnosko us because it doesn't know God, right? Now, back to us and God and us being like God and it being revealed when he is revealed and all that stuff, right? In paragraph 8. Here, it's a similar kind of move, but it's much more obviously a part of this. It's much more obviously relevant. And I think it is it's much more directly connected because his own works were evil and his brothers righteous. Do not be surprised, brothers, if the world hates you. That is, instead of being a side note now, this is an obvious application, just as his use of the word adelphoi in the middle is an invitation to application, right? This is not an academic discussion of Cain, right? He's like, I'm not just doing some Old Testament interpretation right here, right? I'm not just giving my reading about how do we understand Genesis chapter 4. Because by the way, that's totally needed, isn't it? Genesis 4 does not say why Cain murdered his brother. This is another really kind of conspicuous thing. Like, and for what reason did he murder him? Yeah, actually tell me, because the text doesn't at all. At all. Um, and I would urge caution here. If when I said that, if I said the text doesn't tell us why Cain murdered his brother, did a theory jump to your mind? Right? Like, did something about like Cain's sacrifice didn't include blood, but Abel's did, or something like that, right? I know, like when I growing up, I was taught, some of those things as well. Um, but those are all reasons that have been provided interpretively. The text doesn't say, the text doesn't tell us at all why Cain was upset. There are some things we can infer from one either more or less directly about what it was that made Cain so angry about Abel. But the text doesn't tell us. And so therefore it opens up a wide field of meditation on that whole situation. Right. Um, so again, it's conspicuous to me. Um, uh, it's conspicuous to me that the theoretical question that he asks, and thanks to what did he butcher him, is like a question the text demands, right? Um, yeah. Why did he slay him? Why was he angry? What was it about the sacrifice situation? Why was Cain's sacrifice not accepted and Abel's was? We don't know. The text doesn't say, right? So John's asking like a hot question in a sense, right? But again, I think in the next, like immediately in verse 14, he is bringing it back and saying like, okay, hang on, folks, right? We have not moved into, you know, Bible sermon time, right? We have not moved into like, let me give you my own theory as to why what was going on with Cain and Abel there that the text doesn't supply explicitly, right? Um, he's saying, don't be surprised if the world hates you. He's saying this is a pattern that we can we can see, right? This is very relevant. Cain is just the first illustration of this pattern. And why? Why does the world hate you? Which is a step beyond not knowing you, right? And is which is itself a step beyond just being kind of an alternative to God, to the Father, as it was in back in paragraph 6, right? Don't love the world or the things of the world. Um, these things come from the world, not from the Father. P.S. Or rather, in addition, the world doesn't know you. Of course it doesn't, because it doesn't know God, right? Oh, and furthermore, um, the world is going to hate you. Don't be, I mean, there's nothing surprising in that. Don't marvel if you find that the world hates you. Why? Well, notice if we like add up those world references, what he's been busily doing in between, which is kind of culminating here so far in his description of Cain, this example, this illustration of what he was just talking about in paragraph 9, right? The one who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. The one who does sin is of the accuser, ectu diabolo, just like ectu ponero, is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. The Son of God appeared for this purpose. This is why the Son of God was revealed, to destroy, to pull apart the erga, the works of the accuser. No one, the um the no one who is born of God does sin, because his seed, God's seed, abides in him, and he cannot sin because he is born of God. By this, the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. Anyone who does not do righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not love his brother. So the one who does sin is ec tu diabolo, is of the accuser, is of the evil one, like Cain, right? Take, for instance, Cain, who was ec tu panero and butchered his brother. And thanks to what did he butcher him? Because his erga, his works, were ponera, just like the works, the erga of the diabolo, right? Which the Son of God was revealed in order to destroy. He has strengthened this opposition. That opposition, which was more gently put forward at the beginning, right? Between the love of God and the love of the world, or the love of God and the desire of the world. These things come from the Father, these things come from the world. But if you are a child of God, you are going to be fundamentally different in some ways from the children of the world, the children of the evil one, the children of the accuser. And so they're not even going to know you. They won't be acquainted with you because they're not acquainted with God. Make sure nobody leads you astray about this, right? So again, verse 13, don't be surprised if the world hates you. Should be the logical conclusion, right? What he laid out, because his own works were ponera and his brothers were righteous. What does that mean? Well, based on what he just said in paragraph 9, if Cain's erga were ponera, if his works were evil, then he was ectu poneru, right? And his brothers' works were righteous. He was doing righteousness and was a child of God and was abiding in God, and the seed of God was abiding in him. So there's nothing marvelous, there's nothing strange about the antipathy of the world, because we saw the conflict. One of the reasons I think that we're going back to the devil, to the accuser language, which is not something, I mean, we're getting, we talked about this before. We're getting this kind of for the first time here, uh, between in the epistle about the devil, about the evil one. We've got hints about the evil one, right? But in paragraph 7, he crystallizes it. He doesn't just build, as he does, this really clear dichotomy between those who do righteousness and those who do sin, right? He also talks about this figure, the accuser. And of course, we were discussing how that word, the accuser, translated devil, but means accuser, how that seems to pick up on and be a contrast to Jesus as advocate, right? The diabolo being the opposite of the paraclete here, the advocate. If Jesus is our advocate, this other, the evil one, is the accuser. And so he sort of points to this, just as those who do righteousness are children of God, those who do sin are ectu diabolo, are of the accuser. And notice that the opposition of like those who are trying to, benefit themselves at the expense of others. That's what an accuser is. Mostly in a Roman court of law, right? um, there is implied the opposition, right? Not just in some abstract or impersonal sense doing bad things over here, right? Um, it's about they're involved, right? Those who do sin as opposed to doing righteousness are intrinsically involved in are intrinsically involved with the accuser, with working to bring others down. Remember, what does it all come down to, right? What is the illustration, the manifestation, the embodiment of doing righteousness versus doing sin? Do you love your brother or do you not love your brother? Right? That's what loving your brother versus hating your brother, as he established back in paragraph 4, right? That's what it's about, right? That's what doing righteousness versus doing sin is about. Sin, hamartia, is lawlessness, right? Anomia, rebellion. And it's also, as he moves on, accusation, attacking others. Um, it is like the works of the accuser, which works the Son of God appeared in order, was revealed in order to pull apart, in order to destroy. Um, yes. Now you're right, Hea. It's not so much the anger of Cain that Genesis 4 doesn't give any reason for. It's why God didn't look favorably on the sacrifice that is not said. Yeah, you're right. You're right. That is an important distinction. I think what I was skipping a step, basically. Um, this you're right that the big thing that is not said in Genesis 4 is why God didn't accept Cain's sacrifice but did accept Abel's. That explanation is the thing that is, if I could say it, explicitly not explained, right? Cain's anger, um, I agree they're not the same thing. Cain's anger against Abel, like Cain is upset about the fact that his sacrifice is not accepted for reasons we do not know, right? And that's the context of the warning that God gives to Cain, that sin is lying in wait for him, right? Sin is crouching at his door. And he then goes out and kills his brother. That is, he is angry at his brother. His anger, his violence is directed at his brother, taken out on his brother. Um, Abel is innocent, not only in the sense that he didn't do anything wrong, but also in the sense that he is something close to an innocent bystander, right? Cain's beef isn't with Abel. Cain's beef is with God, right? Um, is it shame that he's feeling? Like, does he know why his his sacrifice was not accepted? And he's ashamed of that and wants to take that out on someone, wants to push that towards somebody else in anger? Or is he angry at God? Right? Um, does he not feel shame, but just anger, right? Um, you know, and is taking his anger against God out on Abel, or some kind of combination of those two things. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah. Anyway, I agree, Haya, that you're right. She points out the parallel between the children of the world and Cain and the children of God and Abel seems also to give some reason for the world to hate them. Um, yes, Yeah, it does. Um, well, it doesn't, it doesn't. Like it's a pattern, it's a repeated pattern, but it's not exactly a reason, right? Um, yeah, again, in the sense that like there was no reason for Abel to kill Cain. There's nothing, no reason. No, Abel didn't cause it. Nothing Abel did caused that, right? It was something in Cain that caused that. It was Cain's own choice that caused that. And that I think is why John is saying, don't be surprised, right? If you find that the world hates you, don't be shocked. Don't be like, whoa, what did I do? I didn't do anything. Well, yeah, no, neither did Abel, right? So no, we shouldn't be surprised if the world hates us. We shouldn't be surprised. The children of God should not be surprised if the world hates them, because it will hate them entirely unprovokedly, but that is by anything that they did, right? Because his own deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. Um, yeah, yeah. Oh, hey, I totally agree. It's a very human reaction, right? The story of Cain and Abel and the way that John is talking about it here are both things that we can relate to very easily. Definitely, definitely. Um, uh, Aiden says, I think the larger idea John is getting at is that evil wants to destroy righteousness just as much as righteousness wants to destroy evil. Yes, yes. That's one of the things I was going back to paragraph 9 about, is that the antipathy between good and evil, between, of course, there's antipathy, of course, there's opposition between the advocate and the accuser. They have totally opposite jobs. One is setting out to tear down for its own benefit. The other is trying to defend and to defeat the case of the accuser, right? In order to preserve that which is being accused. The Son of God was revealed for this purpose, to pull apart the works of the accuser, right? So there's an intrinsic, they're not just, you know, he talks about them as if they're, you could just think they're parallel, right? By this, the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. The children of God and the children of the accuser. Yep, there they are. Two different camps, right? Living side by side. No, they can't live side by side. Don't be shocked when suddenly you find that the world hates you because they're doing the erga, the works of the devil, which is accusation. And the Son of God was revealed for this purpose, to destroy the works of the devil. Um, yeah. Now, this is not to say, and I think this is really important. This doesn't mean like there's a natural antipathy. Both of them, like, this is not reciprocal in that way, right? The accuser's job is to attack people. What is the defendant's job? What is the advocate's job? What is the Son of God's job? To pull apart the works of the accuser, not to destroy him and his children, right? We are not at war with the world. The world might be at war with us, but we're not at war with the world. We can't forget where we started, right? What is the message we've heard from the beginning? To love one another. What he's going to go on to talk about, of course, is love. Yes, Randall, that's exactly right. The motivations behind the actions are just as opposite as the actions themselves. And that is the key thing to remember, right? I'll close on this because we're about out of time. But I think, all right. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at myself. I'm laughing at myself making such a momentous, broad, sweeping statement as I'm about to make. But this seems to me to be a really important crisis in the church today, at least in America, that I see, is that too many Christians have been sucked into thinking that if they are against the proper things, right, then they're doing it right. That to be a Christian means to be opposed to the world. And too many Christians are opposing hatred with hatred, believing that they're doing right, believing that they are. I mean, this, and again, we all do this. I'm not saying about, those poor benighted people out there. We all have this temptation. We all get sucked into doing this, right? But the way to pull apart the works of the evil one, as the Son of God was revealed in order to do, is through love, as John's going to go on and explain in the whole rest of this paragraph, right? Um, yeah. Yeah, Stephen, you're exactly right. I think too often we act like Jonah. We sin and we don't want God to love and forgive. Yeah, no, exactly. Jonah, the end of Jonah is such a relevant thing, isn't it? Right? Right. Um, God, you're not actually gonna forgive them, are you? Oh man. That rots. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yeah, yeah. So I want to see as we move forward into the rest of this paragraph, I want to be looking at the way in which John, having established that clear dichotomy between the children of God and the children of the accuser, right? That dichotomy is obvious, he says, right? Between those who do righteousness and those who do sin. Um, the ones whose deeds are evil and the other whose deeds are righteous. And how we shouldn't be surprised if that creates hatred, right? And how important it is. How he goes on to show that this is not a reciprocal. It is a dichotomy, but it's not a reciprocal struggle. So we'll wrestle with this more as we move forward. But again, I think this is such an important message. All right. I'll end with that. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to moving on. We're gonna where John goes in verse 14 from this. His talking about life and death is a little bit unexpected to me. He hadn't, these are new words that he's not really been talking about so much. He's introducing this whole new thing, right? In a sense. Not just talking about love and hatred, not just talking about sin and righteousness, right? But bringing life and death into it. What kind of dimension does that add as we move on from 14 through 15 and on towards the end of the paragraph? All right. Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to that next time. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. Have a great afternoon.